everyone, Ty Collins here, ready to go with another Lawrence University Career Center podcast, where we regularly check in with Lawrence alumni to find out what's happening in their careers and their lives after Lawrence. And joining us today from the Lawrence class of 2002 is Chuck Erickson. Chuck earned his Bachelor of Arts in Spanish and Bachelor of Music in Choral and General Music Education. While a student, Chuck worked in the admissions office and remained in the admissions office for his first year after graduation. He then earned his master's degree in Educational Leadership and Policy Studies from Iowa State University. Chuck then returned to Lawrence to work in the admissions office, where he remained for almost 14 years. Today, Chuck is an independent educational consultant for College Connectors, where he works with students and their families trying to find the right college fit for that student. Chuck, welcome to the show.
Well, Ty, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Well, great. So I want to start off today by talking about the fact that you've never really left school or higher education. Why have you chosen education as your life's mission?
Well, for many reasons. One was when I was in middle school and high school, it was my dream to become a teacher. I was really impacted by teachers in middle school and high school, and I wanted to be able to give back and teach others. I was doing peer tutoring in high school. I was helping out doing summer camps and leading other programs, and I really love working with students and helping them discover new ideas and learn about who they are. So my goal originally was to be a Spanish-speaking music teacher. So I went to Lawrence to do that as a double degree student, and then discovered that that was not going to be my path, but I still loved education. And thankfully, I found a pathway to pursue that in higher education and now in educational consulting.
So you do now work as an independent consultant for an organization named College Connectors. Can you tell us more about the organization and what you do for them?
Sure. College Connectors was founded over 20 years by Dr. Valerie Broughton in the Twin Cities of Minnesota as a way to help students and families navigate the college search and application process. Coincidentally, she also graduated from Iowa State University, except she has her PhD, and she wanted to create a company that helps students not get scared by the college admissions process. When students are in high school, they have so much going on, and it's really hard to figure out what to do. So College Connectors steps in and helps families and students navigate that process. So there are currently over 10 of us, and we are scattered throughout the country. The vast majority of our clients are virtual. So that's kind of fun. I never thought I would be working a virtual job, but here I am. And it's a great opportunity for me to work one-on-one with students and families.
Did you go virtual due to COVID, or were you virtual before that?
So we had a small virtual presence before COVID for families that were not in our immediate area. But before COVID, I was 90% in person, 10% virtual. Okay. I am now the exact opposite of that. I am 90% virtual and 10% in person. Currently, I have clients in over 10 different states from Virginia all the way to Hawaii.
Well, you are, as I mentioned, an independent consultant, so you are associated with College Connectors, but you also do kind of do your own thing as well with the resources they provide. I'm curious if you could talk about the difference that you noticed working for yourself versus working for somebody else, because you did work for Lawrence for a long time. For students who are considering venturing out on their own versus going to work for a traditional employer, what's the difference? How would you describe how one is different than the other?
Correct. So as a traditional employee within the university setting, that is an expectation that I would be in the office from a certain hour to a certain hour, be there on certain days, had very concrete tasks that had to be accomplished every day, every week, every month, whatever that may be. And for that, I was then given a regular salary, typically every 2 weeks, to pay for what I've been doing to work for. So that's a traditional employee. And as an independent educational consultant, I'm an independent contractor. So I am not an employee of College Connectors. I am contracted with College Connectors to work with students. So what's the benefit there? I get to make up my own work schedule. There's expectations that I need to be available for students, but I set the days and hours and times that I would like to be available for my students. So for example, my day does not start before 10 a.m. That is a hardcore rule of mine, and that's the way I am. I work typically Sunday to Thursday because no student wants to talk to me on a Friday or a Saturday, typically. But I do adjust those hours throughout the year. So right now, as we're recording this, we're in the middle of application season. So I'm working way more hours. I'm typically working now 7 days a week for longer hours because this is the busiest part of my year. Once the busy season ends, my schedule will drastically change and I will have way more free time because students are not needing me as much. So independent contracting is great if you love some flexibility, but you are going to have a hard time getting an independent contractor job right off the bat. You're probably going to have to work a more traditional job and get some experience. So then you can work as an independent contractor a little bit easier because you can say, yep, I've experienced doing this job. I now do not need the framework of a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. I can do this independently and figure out my own schedule. So that was my experience with it.
How did you know how to start your own business? How do folks learn how to do that?
Yeah, so back when I was at Lawrence, we didn't have a business and innovation or entrepreneurship program. So I am running a business with no business background. But what my father taught me a long time ago is know what you know, understand what you don't know, and then hire people to help you with what you don't know. So I have people that help me navigate the business side of things. So that was my biggest switch from being an independent contractor is I have to ask families to pay for me. So that was a learning curve on how to do that and then how to balance all the checks coming in and all the expenses. So I thankfully have an accountant that helps me navigate all of these tasks and figure out all those pieces. But yeah, that was probably the biggest learning curve for me. But thanks to my Lawrence education, I was able to figure out what questions I needed to get answered, find the people that had the answers to those questions, and have been navigating it quite well.
You mentioned that this is your busiest time of year, and as you said, we're recording this in fall of 2023. So are you working mostly with high school seniors at this point, or is it a class earlier?
Our company, we have programs that run from 8th graders all the way through seniors, and we even have consultants that help with graduate school navigation. So we all have different timelines as to what we're working with. Most of my students are high school seniors and high school juniors. So I kind of have two trains going down the track right now. I have the high school seniors who are trying to figure out where to apply and get their applications in before the deadlines, and that's the bulk of my work. And then I have high school juniors who are just kind of starting this whole thing and figuring out where do I even begin? How do I figure out what colleges could plausibly work for me? So I have both of those trains happening simultaneously, and the application deadlines are coming up very fast, and my students are frantically writing essays and sending them to me for edits and review.
Well, you certainly won't be the last Laurentian to go from being a college student to working in a higher education setting. Can you talk about the transition from being a college student to a higher educational professional, and what advice you would give to students who want to work in education but not in a teaching role?
Yeah, there's a lot of great things. The biggest thing is when you are at Lawrence, get a campus job. I highly recommend campus jobs. It does not matter where. Many students are hired by admissions. It's one of the offices that hires the most students on campus, from tour guides to lunch hosts, overnight hosts, all the different students that are needed in that program. Or you could also work in residence life. That's another major area. But many of the campus jobs are things that could become a full-time career. So when I was a student, there were several of us that decided to transition from being students into being staff roles. In fact, one of my first bosses at Lawrence in fact, my first two bosses at Lawrence were both Lawrence alums, and they both had transitioned from being students to working at the college. As far as making that happen, talk to your supervisors at the college. How did you get to this role from where you are as a student? Admission seems to be a very obvious, natural transition because you go from being a student worker to being an admissions counselor or an assistant director of admissions, something like that. But others may not be as clear cut as to, okay, how do I work in student affairs? How do I work in recreation and health and wellness or something in a different area, or athletics? So talk to the people who have those jobs right now and say, okay, how did you get here? Many of those positions do require a master's degree. So I decided to work at Lawrence for 1 year after I graduated, and then I went off to get my master's degree. And I went to a master's program that gave me a wide range of experiences so I could see all of the facets of higher education. And then I decided to go back to admissions. I am unusual that I have a student affairs background, so I should be working in more the student affairs side of the house, which would be residence life, all the support services that happen for students outside of the classroom. But I decided to take that knowledge and go back into admissions and help with the recruitment and retention type role. As far as non-teaching, I would argue that I am still a teacher, even as a staff person. So I may not have a faculty title as far as teaching a course, but in all of the institutions I've worked at, and especially at Lawrence, I was still helping students learn, grow, and understand themselves and figure out what do they want to be and give them advice either based off of my experience or from the experiences that I know from my friends and colleagues and fellow Laurentians. So I still feel like I am a teacher. It's just not in your traditional K-12 stand in front of a classroom and teach type role.
You mentioned some various positions within a university or higher ed setting that students working in enrollment or admissions could advance to. What about jobs outside of higher education? What are some fields that you've seen students who worked in admissions or enrollment move into outside of a college setting?
Yeah, the logical one is, I can work admissions for the rest of your life. And yes, you can. You can get all the way up to VP of enrollment and be in that realm. But keep in mind that admissions is basically sales. So an admissions person is basically helping a family understand what is the value and what are the services that an educational institution provides for a student and a family. So if you like sales and you like working with a variety of customers, so to speak, because students coming through the admissions process are basically customers, admissions is a great start for sales. I've also seen colleagues move into law, because in admissions, you have to be able to stand and talk and present and think off the top of your head and understand information and process lots of facts very quickly. So you could go into law after that. But I've also seen admissions go into public health or social work or travel adventure guides. I mean, it really goes into a wide variety of areas. Admissions encompasses a plethora of tasks and things that you need to do within the position. So it really sets you up well for a wide variety of positions, not only in higher education.
The comparison to sales is interesting. Folks who work in sales, if they're not meeting their quotas, don't work in sales much longer. Is it similar in admissions? If you're not bringing in enough students, is your job in jeopardy?
It's going to depend, but for the most part, the National Association for College Admissions Counseling really frowns upon having quotas. That is an ethics standard of the National Association for College Admissions Counseling, which is the organization that works with admissions offices all across the country. That was an issue that actually happened with the for-profit colleges, and that's why many of the for-profit colleges no longer exist. But maybe it's not that you're doing recruiting. Maybe you're helping run the visit programs that happen. Maybe you're helping with the publications. If you love marketing, all of the brochures that colleges send out are from a marketing perspective, and either that's housed in a communications office or housed in the admissions office. So there's marketing aspects. Thousands of emails are sent out. There's data that needs to be analyzed. So if you're a data wonk and you love crunching numbers, there's data involved in admissions. So there's not just the sales aspect, but there's many other aspects of running a business, quote unquote, which would be the university, in the admissions office.
It sounds like from talking to you that working for Lawrence certainly has influenced your career, but I'm sure being a student at Lawrence has influenced your career as well. Looking back at your time as a student, are there some things that still kind of influence the way you look at the world today? You can talk about classes, student organizations, the total Lawrence experience.
There's a lot from my Lawrence experience that I use on probably a daily basis. So thinking of coursework, the fact that I took a wide variety of classes, not only just in my major, but across the curriculum. So I took, intro to physics. I took one of the lower level biology courses. I took introduction to religious studies. I took a lot of anthropology, and I use that information quite often my intro to religious studies course, which was kind of a broad spectrum of all the religions that are out there, I work with a broad range of students of different religious backgrounds. So I have to understand what's going on. So I know how to work with them around their specific religious holidays. I was really shocked at how much my broad education, not just directly my major, is a part of what I do now in independent educational consulting. I was very involved as a student. So I was involved in 2 different fraternities when I was on campus. I was also involved in several of the student clubs and organizations, and interacting with a wide variety of students has also impacted my work. So many of my students are athletes. I am not an athlete in any way, shape, or form, but I know enough about athletics because I went to a lot of the games and I had a lot of friends at Lawrence that were athletes, that I can talk to my students about their athletic pursuits and what they're interested in based off of my connections. Same thing with the international students. I've met a lot of students from a wide variety of countries when I was at Lawrence. And now, being a virtual counselor, I'm interacting with all types of students all across the country. So I really appreciated the fact that I had a plethora of experiences at Lawrence, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom, that I still utilize today in my daily work.
Thinking back to when you were fresh out of college, what most surprised you? Is there something that you wish Lawrence had told you or taught you, but they didn't or they hadn't?
I think my biggest shock, and this doesn't mean to sound like a huge flex, but Lawrence people are really smart. And there are people out there that are not as smart as Lawrence people. So that was a big shock. I think just getting out into the world and navigating the world, I was very fortunate to have a couple of different internship experiences while I was at Lawrence. One was in nonprofit management. So I helped work with a couple nonprofit agencies in Appleton. And I think getting out of the Lawrence bubble, so to speak, and getting connected to the city helped me understand things better. Like, oh, how does getting an apartment work? How does just real life existence work? How do you go grocery shopping? My boss in the internship used to take me grocery shopping with him because I said I was clueless about that. And he said, okay, let's go. So not only was I learning the internship, but he was also helping me learn some life skills that I needed to understand. So education is important and being in the classroom is important, but get out of the Lawrence bubble and connect to things outside of Lawrence. And an internship is a great way to do that, whether that is an internship that's already been designed and a company just is looking for someone to fill that role, or something that you create and you say, okay, I'm interested in learning this new skill and I would like to create an internship that connects to this skill.
Yeah, and that's an answer I get quite often to that question, is kind of the life skills answers. Like, well, I didn't really leave campus much for 4 years, so I didn't know how to do the life stuff when I left. So definitely that, and that's something we strongly encourage here too, is at least 2 internships over the summer while you're a student is going to be so helpful, just to do things that aren't here.
Absolutely. I worked in the admissions office one summer. I worked at Bjorklanden for 2 summers. And I learned a lot of life skills living at Bjorklanden. When you're there all summer, it's a very different experience. And it was an awesome experience. And I highly recommend students check it out. But it is a very different experience than just being up there for a weekend with your club or organization or academic department.
No, it's hard work working up there all summer. I know what you mean.
Absolutely. But I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
You are involved with LUAA, which is the Lawrence University Alumni Association, which probably to most students doesn't ring a bell. Can you tell us more about what that is and why you've chosen to remain as connected as you are to Lawrence 20 years later?
Absolutely. The Lawrence University Alumni Association is every person that has gone to Lawrence. So whether they have graduated or not graduated, they are a part of the Lawrence University Alumni Association. And the board of directors are a group of alumni that span various generations and many different backgrounds and ideas and personalities and skill sets. And our job really is to help to connect alumni to each other, connect alumni to the campus, promote the mission and vision of the president, and support the efforts of what the university is doing. And students always say, okay, I'm looking for a job. I don't know how to network. A great way to network is connecting with the Lawrence University Alumni Association board. We are all involved and engaged alumni, some as 1 year or 2 years out, others that have been out for several decades. And why we are on this board is to help students, improve your situation and get connected to life outside of Lawrence and be forever a Laurentian. Our task is to promote the ideas of being a forever Laurentian, because you are at Lawrence for 4 or 5 years, but Lawrence is going to be with you for the rest of your life. And the board wants to help find ways to engage alums and students in that discussion as being a forever Laurentian. So I am the only member on the board that lives in the Appleton area. There are some other members of the board that live in Wisconsin, but there are board members literally across the country and around the world. And we come to campus twice a year. And when we're on campus, we're going to have opportunities for you to come and meet with us. So please reach out and meet with us. You can also reach out to us outside of those board meetings. You just need to connect with Forever Laurentian, and we will be happy to meet with you. But yeah, get involved. You are at Lawrence for only 4 or 5 years, but Lawrence is a part of the rest of your life.
And you, like every other alum I've spoken with on this podcast, are more than willing to hear from students and answer a question.
Absolutely. Add me on LinkedIn. That's why I have my LinkedIn profile, is utilize that to reach out to me. And I'm happy to chat with any Laurentian, whether that be about careers, life after Lawrence, whatever you want to connect about.
And I will include the link to your LinkedIn profile in the description of this episode.
I appreciate that.
We'll wrap up here shortly. Just a couple more quick questions. In case any listeners to this podcast might have siblings in high school or kids in high school, and they're beginning the college selection process, I'm going to ask for one good piece of free advice today.
I'll be very honest. I always do free consultations. So many of us who work in the independent educational consulting world, we are happy to meet with families for free to answer some of those nerve-wracking questions of where do I start? What do I do? How do I begin? I'm going to give you 2 pieces of advice. One is start earlier than you think. A lot of students wait until the start of their senior year to go, oh yeah, I should probably think about college or life after high school. That conversation should be started a lot earlier. Basically, as soon as you're set in your high school path, freshman, sophomore year, maybe beginning of junior year, start exploring colleges. And the other thing is explore colleges that you may have not heard of. Many people who land at Lawrence never heard of Lawrence when they were in high school, but I've always heard students go, man, I'm so glad I found Lawrence. So if you're just starting the college search, look beyond what I would call the ESPN colleges or the schools that you hear on a regular basis. Find those hidden gems and those interesting colleges that may provide you with a unique experience that might be different than what you were expecting.
Is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know, a last suggestion for Laurentians about to enter the working world?
Sure. When I was just back on campus for the Lawrence University Alumni Association Board of Directors meeting, we had the opportunity to have dinner with about 20 or so students. And I noticed that Laurentians still to this day, and this was true when I was a student, are so dang humble. You're just like, oh, I'm just doing a couple things. Oh, I'm just researching a small project. Oh, I have some, minor thing. Lawrence students are doing amazing things, and you need to be able to talk about yourself. You need to be able to say, yes, I've done this research project and it's been published here, or, oh, I've traveled to this country, or, oh, I am doing this interesting combined major between physics, studio art, and a minor in German. Those things make Lawrence students Laurentians, and be proud of the things that you are doing. If you've started a club, if you've expanded a club, if you've done well in your athletic pursuits, if you've tried out a new instrument in the conservatory, you've done a unique concert, all of those things may seem very normal inside Lawrence because a lot of students are creative and expressive and engaged. But outside of Lawrence, those things aren't normal. The Lawrence students are highly engaged and highly involved. You need to be comfortable as you enter the real world to be able to talk about yourself and the experiences that you did while you were at Lawrence.
Absolutely, completely agree. Chuck Erickson from the Lawrence class of 2002, thank you for joining us on the Career Center podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.